All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our very rainy Tier Talks 2024. So thank you all for joining us. How many alumni are in the house today? Let's hear it for alumni. I noticed a couple students in here, also known as future alumni. Let's hear from the students. And thank you for getting up before, 1 in the afternoon. Thank you for that. It's hard. I've had my own problems when I was a student. And I see some future students. Let's give a cheer from the future students of Binghamton. So my name is Dana West, class of 1998. I have a couple jobs here, the most important one being that the Tier Talks is currently my baby. It's under my care. I'm on the Binghamton University Alumni Association Board of Directors. I am the chair of the Lifelong Learning Committee. We like to consider ourselves the fun committee. I think this is pretty fun. We also do, shameless plug, our travel program. So if you're seeing mailings come to you from our travel program, just a hint for what's coming up for next year, but some river cruises in Europe, Civil War battlefields, if that's your kind of thing, and Denali National Park. So keep an eye on those mailings, and please join us on some of those tours. Just a little housekeeping for today. Let's tell you a little bit about TIER first. So TIER, T-I-E-R, is Talks that Inspire, Educate, and Resonate. It was founded by Bill Groner, I want to say 8 years ago. Bill's class is 77, so like I said, this is just in my hands for the time being, and we'll hand it over to somebody else to really bring these events to you guys on an annual basis. This is our flagship event. So the speakers for these events typically come from university alumni, university staff, alumni, faculty, and occasionally students. I really consider this one to be one of our great ones. A slightly different panel discussion. Often, if you've been to these before, we have each speaker with 10 to 15 minutes on their own. So this is really going to be a interactive event. We'll have our Q&A mic up here, so jot your questions down, kind of think about those. I'll be back to you at the end, but what I'd really like to do is hand it off to our moderator, Christopher Robbins. He's the founding director of the School of the Arts. So I'm going to hop away and hand it off to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So he was saying I'm the founding director of the School of the Arts. It started up a year and a half ago, and so this is the beginning of the second year there. And before here, really my experience has been arts have brought me all over the world. I was working in arts and conflict resolution in the South Pacific and Southeast Europe. I was working in arts and healthcare outcomes in West Africa, lived in Tokyo in Japan, Fiji Islands, been in West Africa, and then back to New York where I grew up, where I was working at School of Art and Design at Purchase College. And for a year and a half now, Binghamton University, where I'm founding the School of the Arts. And what brought me here is, as you can tell, I believe that the arts can have a profound impact on society and is relevant even for people who think they don't care about the arts. Arts create culture. We have a lot of people creating culture in this room right now. And Binghamton University is one of those rare cases where we have an acclaimed Research One university that's actually recognizing and investing in the arts. So that is super exciting for me. We have, the School of the Arts is bringing together art history, art and design, cinema, creative writing, music, and theater. And beyond that, we have neuroscience majors in our orchestra. They're taking our cinema classes in our theater productions. It's just a super exciting place to be pushing how the arts and culture can have an impact on the world around us. And that's why I'm here to talk with our four producers today, also about the impact of arts, how their time at Binghamton has led to the fantastic places they are now. So let me briefly introduce. We have Marc Dworkin, who graduated in '00, and he's an executive producer for the Thundermans on Nickelodeon. Yeah. And then, and over there we have Emily Gandolfo, who graduated in '14 and is producer for Morning Joe on MSNBC. And then Brandon Gardner, who graduated in '05 and is co-creator for the show In the Know on Peacock. And then Sara Molinari, who graduated in '13, and then MS in '14, is a segment producer for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. So I'm sure you're as excited as I am to be able to share this time with these four people. Okay, so let's start. First, I guess we'll start with Marc. If you could tell us a bit about yourself and your current project, your current work.
So I'm Marc. I'm from Strong Island. And, woo! And I write mainly children's sitcoms, so like the Hannah Montanas and those kind of shows. So the Thundermans is one of those. And right now we are shooting a Thundermans reboot in Canada called Thundermans Undercover, which is coming out next year.
Great. Moving along.
Just in order?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Brandon. I grew up in the Adirondacks in this town called Saranac Lake. And now, yeah, thanks. And I live in LA now, and that show In the Know, which is on Peacock, which is adult animation, which always makes it sound dirty, but it just means there's like swear words in it. Came out this year on Peacock. And then I have a movie I co-wrote with my writing partner who I made the animated show with that he's about to direct in like a week. And then there's like another show we're trying to develop and sell.
Thank you so much. And Sarah, could you tell us about yourself and your current work? Oh, I
Yeah,
skipped
so
over one.
I'm from upstate New York, from Oswego, and live in New York City now. And I am a segment producer for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. I work mostly on the monologue, do a lot of graphics work, animations, produce animations, mock-ups, lower thirds, all that stuff that you see in the scripted comedy segments for The Late Show.
Thank you. And of course, Emily.
Hi, is this working? Yeah. Oh, I'm Emily. I'm from Long Island originally. I live in the city now. I am the coordinating producer at Morning Joe, so I am responsible for pretty much all the editorial content we do every day, which this year has been absolutely insane. So there's a lot going on, but it's fun.
Great. And and so a bit of the background, like how did you land your current role?
Me?
Yep.
Luck. So I had actually a very, very unconventional path. Binghamton does not have a journalism school. Most of my colleagues to go to journalism school. I was a creative writing and theater major within the English department, but I guess that would be under the School of the Arts now. And I knew I wanted to write for live performance. I didn't realize that news was an option. It wasn't even on my radar. I went to work in Disney World after college. I was writing for Disney, and I wanted to come home, and the only TV opportunities at home were in news, so I applied to a bunch of jobs. I didn't even know what they were. I think there were like 140 jobs in total. 2 called me back. One was a local news station, I don't know, News 12, which is on Long Island. That was, mine was in the Bronx and Brooklyn. And so they were like, yeah, like, can send us a news writing sample. And so I Googled, how do I write for news? I had never taken a news writing class or a journalism class in my life, but I was a creative writing major. And so there's a lot of creativity that goes into news writing. And so I fudged it, and they gave me a 6-week contract as a freelance producer. They told me they'd train me, and then they promoted me to full-time after that. I went to the CBS local station after that, and from there I knew I really wanted to work in politics. MSNBC was always the goal. I loved Morning Joe. A job opened up. I applied, and they called me, and it was kind of just seamless from there, but definitely an unconventional path. So.
Thank you. Sarah, my understanding is you also had a somewhat unconventional path
Yes.
to Late Show.
Also a
Yeah.
very unconventional path for me. I majored in accounting here at Binghamton. Yeah. School of Management, accounting all the way, did my 5th year, got the master's, sat for my CPA, did public accounting for a year, and in all of this, I hated accounting every step of the way. But I did have a professor here in Binghamton who said, I don't think everyone should be an accountant, but I think you should all be accounting majors because it gets your foot in the door in any company you want to work in. And so I took that to heart, and I did it, and it worked out for me. The summer after my junior year, I interned in TV. That was my year to have sort of more fun internships I was interested in before I had to do my, my accounting-focused internships. So that summer I interned at the Colbert Report and at CNBC. And in that time, while I was interning at the Colbert Report, I had a great time. I was also, believe it or not, the only accounting major of the intern group. So I was really able to stand out. I kept in touch with those accountants. I actually worked part-time for the show while I finished school here. I would go down to New York City once a month and help them out. And then after I graduated, I went and did accounting. I did public accounting for a year, and I was able, 1 year, you need 1 year to get your CPA, for those who do not know, and good for you, I'm happy for you, it's a happier life. But 1 year to the day, I was able to quit because Stephen had announced he was switching from the Colbert Report and taking over the Late Show, and the staff was doubling. So I kept in touch with those accountants from my internship year, and they were like, staff is doubling, we need another accountant, how do you feel? So I was like, absolutely, put in my letter of resignation that day. A year to the day, I was out of public accounting and into TV. And I did do accounting for the Late Show for about a year and a half. Made it known as soon as I got there that I did not want to do accounting forever. And I was able to make the switch a year and a half into the graphics world. So I started as a graphics researcher, and then graphics AP, graphics producer, and now segment producer.
That's great. Yeah, that's really fantastic to see how Binghamton led directly to that, and also how once you kind of find your way and prove yourself as a person, there's so many more options that come up. Great. Brandon, could you talk a bit about what led to your current role?
Sure. So I started at Binghamton as a PPL major because I thought I was going to be a lawyer because I just didn't know about that many different jobs. So I was like, that's one that I have an uncle that does that. And then I started, there's an improv group on campus called the Pappy Parker Players. Woo! Thank you. And I saw like a flyer for them in my dining hall and auditioned and figured out I loved improv more than anything. And so I switched to being a theater major because that was the closest thing I could do to majoring in improv. I was like, well, this is performing. And had a great experience, really liked the theater program, but sort of knew as soon as I graduated I was going to go do improv. And so I moved to New York City right after graduation, and I started taking classes at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York, and that was 2005. And then that was my only dream. I didn't have like a goal beyond that. A lot of people do UCB because they know they want to be on TV or be writers. And I just really wanted to perform in that basement theater at the time, which is now going to be a condo or something. But I loved it there, and all of my connections are my friends that I made doing improv there forever and ever. And then when I moved to LA 6 years ago, my friend Zach Woods, who I became friends with doing improv, he was mainly acting then, and he asked if I wanted to try to write with him. And so then we started writing together. And a few years ago, Mike Judge, who knew Zach from making the show called Silicon Valley, asked Zach if he wanted to develop a show with him, and Zach asked if I could develop it with them. And so we did, and that was this animated show we did for Peacock that came out this year called In the Know. And that was sort of my way into it. And for a long time, most of what I did was teach improv, and I've taken a break from that, but I still love doing that.
Great. Thank you. And does improv play a role in the know? Or?
It does. So one of the reasons why Mike wanted to develop it with Zach is Mike had the idea that he wanted to do an animated show with real interviews. So on the show's set in an NPR studio, and Zach's character is sort of like an Ira Glass sort of Mike Barbaro sort of type of man, and he interviews real celebrities, and those are all unscripted. So like we prepare questions for Zach to ask, and then Zach interviews them for like an hour in character, and then we edit that down to like the 3-minute interviews that appear on the show.
Great. So it sounds like a common theme is taking what you're good at or what's in front of you and being able to turn that into opportunities related to what you actually love.
Yeah. And the one thing that also is like related to that is part of how Zach and I started working together is I had a friend whose husband took a playwriting class, and I sort of took it just because I was like, oh, I like plays, and it was something. And I started doing writing a lot of plays, and people would always be like, why are you doing that? There's like how do you expect to get a career as a playwright? And I was like, I don't know, I just like it. But but the only person who ever liked reading those plays that I wrote was my friend Zach, and so that's why he wanted to write with me years later.
Great, thank you. And Mark, how about you? How did you land your current role?
So I came to Binghamton because my best friend Ed was going here, and I was like, he's here today, and I was like, that seems like a pretty fun time. Yeah. So I came here and I majored in cinema, and I was like, this could be awesome. And I was walking into the cinema class, and I was just telling the story. Then Ken Jacobs, the professor, was like, let us show you the kind of movie we make here at Binghamton. And it was 45 minutes of a flickering screen. And I was like, oh no, what have I done? So I quickly was like, oh no, I'm not an experimental filmmaker. But with all that said, never in my life would I ever try to make those kind of movies. So it was kind of great. And so while I was here, I was like, well, if I can't do narratives, I'm gonna go work at the TV station. So I started working at BTV, and I met mine and Ed's good friend Eugene Leonard, who's a talented filmmaker in New York right now. And we used to make all these movies, and it was amazing. It was such a good thing. And then I was like, well, I'm gonna try to get an internship, because everyone could get an internship, even if you're an experimental filmmaker. So I went down to the OCC, got a listing, and then I got an internship on a Comedy Central show called The Upright Citizens Brigade, which was great, speaking of improv. So it was amazing, but then I quickly learned that working on a film set is like 20 hours a day, and maybe that's not what I want to do with my life. But after that, I graduated. The next summer I graduated, I sent emails out to everyone I'd worked with on the show, and this one woman was working as a production coordinator on a sitcom in New York City in Astoria for an ABC sitcom called Madigan Men, starring the absolutely hilarious Gabriel Byrne, who is not funny but had a sitcom. That lasted 12 episodes. But I was the night PA on that show, so I came in at 5 o'clock every night, got the dinner orders of the writers, and then sat there till 3 in the morning until they finished the script, and then photocopied it, and it was pre-PDF, so I drove around New York City delivering scripts. But while I sat there till 3 in the morning, I was like, oh my God, these people just sit around a table and tell each other jokes. Like, this is a job. So I was like, that's what I want to do. I'm going to be a writer. And then I wrote nothing for years. And then I bummed around New York as a writer's assistant on a couple shows, and I got on another sitcom called Hope and Faith, starring Kelly Ripa. And I was the writer's assistant. And the writer's PA was a guy named Sean, and we started writing after work together. And I finally wrote a script, and we showed it to a couple writers, and they were like, this is pretty good. And then the room on that show was kind of a hot mess, and they had no stories cleared. And they had to shoot an episode in like 3 weeks. And I was like, I'm pretty sure if we pitch anything usable, they'll take it. So we came up with some story ideas, and then knocked on the executive producer's door and pitched it, and she bought it. And then we got to write a script, and then they shot the script, and then we got agents, and then we got staffed on the show the 3rd season, and then it got canceled. And then there was a writer's strike. It was so exciting, guys. And then after the writer's strike, it was pretty bleak, but then we got a call from Disney Channel. They were launching a new channel called Disney XD, and they were doing a show called Aaron Stone about a kid who plays video games, and the video games turn out to be real. So we got staffed on the show and moved our families to Los Angeles, and now we were children's comedy writers. And then we just kind of worked up the ladder, which is always what I kind of wanted to do. So we were staff writers, and then we became executive story editors, and then we became producers, and then on the Thundermans, the 4th season, we became the executive producers, showrunners of the show. And that was cool, and then we created a show called Night Squad immediately after for Nickelodeon. And since then, we've just been able to sell children's shows, and now we get to do the Thundermans again, which is kind of amazing.
Thank you. And what's really inspiring hearing you all talk is I know a lot of students feel people they see on television or on the internet that it's you get discovered, there's some magic step. And what's great is hearing it's one step at a time. It's meeting people who love what you're doing, being connected through every day, and that's just being there, taking your next step, leading to these wonderful experiences. Thank you. And speaking of wonderful experiences, let's jump to Emily now. Let's go back to Binghamton and talk about what experiences were particularly meaningful or influential from your time here.
Oh gosh. I did a lot of work in the theater department. And I think I took one playwriting class. We only offered one playwriting class when I was here. And it was my first foray in writing for live performance. And I kind of figured that's what I wanted to do, but it was always a pipe dream, for lack of a better term. Ha ha ha. I also wrote for Pipe Dream, but I never really saw a world in which that could be me until I took that class. And seeing my work performed for the first time in one of the studios in fine arts was like just kind of mind-blowing. And that's when it occurred to me that this is something that I can really do. And so I just kind of stuck with it, and that's what ended up happening. But it was like you were saying, it's one step at a time. You take one accomplishment and you turn that into, well, now what else can I do with this? And so that kind of propelled me to apply for a show writing internship, and the show writing internship led to a show writing job, and that led to a news writing job, and that led to a producing job. So I mean, it goes and it goes and it goes.
Right. So it sounds like it's like what is going to lead to your dream life, or I don't know if that's a thing, but to what your accomplishments, and I guess that means is we're working to actually put ourselves into everything, make sure we're caring about it, because something we may be blowing off could turn out to be that opportunity.
Right. I mean, and I didn't know what was going to lead to my dream life. I'd never considered news. What I knew was I wanted to write for TV, and I thought I wanted to write for a scripted series, and maybe one day that's still in the cards. I don't like the idea of cancellation. That makes me nervous. So I choose to stay in a WGA East role where I know I'm protected. I liked politics, I liked law, I liked true crime. I was really nosy. I wanted to be involved in everything, and I wanted to know what was going on all the time. And that really translates into an editorial position in news. And it just kind of everything kind of combined into one central focus when I didn't even realize it was a career path. And I kind of just found the place where I fit. But it was through kind of needling away at it and kind of chipping away that I discovered it. I wouldn't have known. So
That's great, thank you. And then Sara, how about for you, when you were coming back to Binghamton, what were some of your most influential or meaningful experiences here?
Yeah, so I took a lot from my professors while I was here. I was obviously, like I said, an accounting major. I was not loving my coursework. Those hard skills they were teaching us, I was not loving. I was doing, but I was also more so absorbing the lessons from my professors, particularly that one professor that I told you said, you don't have to be an accountant, but you should be an accounting major, and that is really what started my whole path, And as an accountant in SOM, you really do learn some pretty valuable soft skills that are helpful in the business world, but you find once you get into this office with a lot of creatives, sometimes those businessy skills come into play because you may be the only one in the room that has them. So I took a lot of that organization that comes in accounting and use that to this day to help keep, I work with a department of 6 graphic designers, all men, and I gotta tell you, somebody does need to keep them a bit organized. So I do use it fairly frequently.
Great, thank you. I guess I'll hop to Mark now. Coming back to Binghamton, influential, memorable experiences.
Like I said, the BTV for me was that was my safe place. And me and Eugene, when we were there, realized that as he was president of the television station, that we could use all the money for the TV station to make a movie. So we basically made a trilogy of movies called the Professor Trilogy. What years? I guess it's 98 probably. Back in the day, kids. There was a movie on BTV called Blinding Light. I don't know if anybody possible, but we showed it all the time, and then Eugene and I were like, we could make one of those. So we made this professor movie, and it was cheesy, it was about a professor who kills people, but it would air on BTV 10 million times a day because we put it on BTV 10 million times a day. And then Ed was at it too, and we'd go out and you'd go to the frat party and they'd be like, the professor, here's your beer. And I was like, I'm a celebrity. I'm doing it. Which really eased the pain from the cinema department where I was like, I don't know what to do. I can't make these 2 scenes that make no sense make sense. It was terrible. So I really valued the TV station that place existed.
Great, thank you. And Brandon, how about you? Some memorable experiences, influential from Binghamton?
Yeah, so the Pappies, the improv group, was a big one. I think partly because it wasn't overseen or in any way connected to any grown-up or anyone official at the university. It was just like we would rent a lecture hall and put on a show. And so it was up to us to advertise. It was up to us to like rehearse and sort of try to teach ourselves improv from like books and be like, well, this is what we're trying. And so that sort of idea of making it happen for yourself, I think was like a good lesson, then moving on to other things where people also aren't trying to necessarily like tell you how to do something. And then I think in the theater department, like a big lesson that eventually sunk in, maybe even my senior year, was that, and this might sound weird, but that like my grades didn't matter. Like at a certain point, it's like no one's gonna care what my theater grade was, and for me that was big because I think I had always seen grades as very important and sort of as like the measure, like in a weird way, almost like the purpose of taking a class was the grade instead of like the purpose of the class was to learn something from that class. And I think through theater, I was like, oh, no, the only reason I'm taking this class is to hopefully apply something I'm learning from this class in my life later. And I learned that partly because my theater grades weren't as good as my grades used to be, where I'd be like in an acting class and be like, I got a B. It's like, and it wasn't something where it was like I could have worked harder. It was just like I just wasn't that good at Shakespeare or whatever I was doing.
Yeah, that's true. Something I try to talk with students a lot is when you get good grades, you get good at getting good grades, which often means learning what a teacher wants. But really the goal of working with students is helping figure out what they want. And so it's really good when people have that realization that I'm not just here to please the teacher, I'm here to figure out what I can get from this institution. And that's much broader than just the classroom as we're seeing today. I'll stick with you and come back to now. So what's the most challenging thing about the work you do these days?
I mean, the most challenging thing about the life in general is the instability of it, and my wife would agree with that, where it's lots of things where to have like a 5-year plan or anything like that is sort of impossible for me, where I have to be like, well, if like I sell this show, we could have this sort of life, and if I don't, it'll be this kind of life, and they're pretty different. And I'm sort of used to it, but it's a part of it, it seems like. And it's also one of those things where it's like, you might have told yourself, well, if I get this, I'll feel safe and secure after that. And I've gotten those things and not felt safe or secure after I got those things. So that's challenging. I don't know. I mean, like truly, listening to like the coming up from being a PA to a writer's assistant, I didn't have that. I would have loved to have had that path, but I couldn't quite figure out how to get into it that way. So I started as a showrunner. It was like my first job, and which in a lot of ways was very fortunate. But also it's like I would have loved to have been working in other positions before that. And that process was fun. Like the whole process of making it was not as challenging. Like the writers were all great to work with. Everyone in the production was great to work with. The creative execs I worked with were great to work with, which I guess is not always the case. Occasionally, maybe stressful things would be like budget things. Like you'd really want a piece of music or something, and you'd be like, well, it costs too much money. But those aren't even that stressful. So I would say like the big stressful thing, like so In the Know, which is the show that's on Peacock, it'd be great if you watched it. But we also know it's not coming back, so if you're like, I'm gonna wait and see if they get 2 seasons, we don't get 2 seasons. That uncertainty of like, well, maybe you're already working on the next show, hopefully that happens, but that's the hardest part. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Sarah, how about you? What do you find most challenging in the work you do?
So I guess I would say the hardest thing is our turnaround time. So we show up there's a writers meeting every day at 9:30, and I come to work with very little idea of what we're going to be doing that day. And that's where all the ideas are pitched. Between 9:30 and 12:30, the writers are writing. Then they rewrite until about 3, which is rehearsal. So we have really from about 12 to 3 to produce the show. before rehearsal. And then we rehearse from 3 to 4, and then they rewrite the show. And so you have between 4 and 5:30 when we tape to, again, make any changes, any new graphics, any new animations that come out of rehearsal. So it's that very quick turnaround time that you might have 100 graphics to make in a day, and they're all coming in, as you're making them, they're just keep coming in because they're constantly writing, and you're trying to stay on top of that pile of new things coming in. So that is certainly the most challenging, but I will say the nice thing about that is when I leave at 7 o'clock when we're done taping, there is nothing else for me to do. There is nothing I can do about that show that already happened. There's nothing from that day that's gonna linger to the next day. It's done, we put it to bed. If things happened, good or bad, they're in the past, and we get another one tomorrow. So it's challenging, but it's also one of my favorite things.
Thank you. And Mark, what do you find most challenging about the work you're doing these days?
I definitely second the instability of the writing world. It's so good when you're working, though. You're like, I'm unstoppable, and then it goes away, and you're like, I'm never gonna work again. But I'm lucky to be working right now. But the hardest thing for me when I became a showrunner was suddenly, which you probably felt, suddenly you're like the CEO of a company, and when me and my writing partner became showrunners of the Thundermans, someone was like, you will never see more people crying in your office than when you're a showrunner. We're like, what are you talking about? Next day, someone was in our office crying. And it's like, so suddenly you have a job where you were used to just writing. That was the only job I had to do, and now I have to be in charge of writing, I have to be in charge of casting, I have to be in charge of editing, I have to be in charge of talking to network executives and managing notes, or if something's happening on set that's causing this person to cry. All of that is a lot, and that I wish at 7 o'clock I got to leave and it didn't follow me home. But you have to watch 3 cuts at night, and you have to read 2 scripts, and it's a daunting amount of work. And I am very lazy, guys, very, 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 very lazy. So, not really the job for me, but so far I seem to be doing it. That's why I have a writing partner. Get a writing partner, guys. Then they do the work for you, and you look great.
Thanks. And Emily, how about you? What's most challenging these days?
Also very lazy, and I don't have a writing partner. We live in a very interesting news cycle, and I'm kind of responsible for curating that. So I work the night before every show, and it's my job to kind of pour through everything that happened that day, become as well-versed in it as I possibly can, research it, verify sources, work with our reporters on the ground, and I essentially turn out like a 20-page report at the end of every night of this is what's going on in the world and this is what we're putting in the show. So I have to be very, very well-versed and very immersed in everything that is going on in world news, but mostly national political news. And that's a lot. And a lot of people say don't stop doom scrolling, turn off the TV, get off Twitter, turn off the news. I don't have that option. So my friends don't always want to be around me because I can't stop talking about what's happening on MSNBC, and that's not always a neat party trick. So that's it's kind of you gotta take time to separate your head from the job and find hobbies, and I don't really have time to do that right now. So that's difficult.
What time do you have to turn in the 20-page report?
1 a.m. Yeah, and then our line producers come in at 2, and then input that into iNews, and that's what gets on the air. We start at 5 really, because we do a show called Way Too Early before Morning Joe. So if you're ever up way too early, you can watch Way Too Early. And so that's kind of our pre-show, and then Morning Joe is our panel show that goes from 6 to 10. So we're pretty much it's a whole day operation.
Wow, it sounds like all 4 of you are talking about, a simple way to put it is that things keep changing in a whole bunch of different ways. And segueing from that, for you, Emily, what are some trends you've noticed that are impacting your work?
Gosh. I'm trying not to get too political. Politics. There's kind of the rise of misinformation and how we combat that, and how do we put out honest, neutral news while at the same time dealing with a lot of different personalities. I mean, I work on a panel show. It's technically a news program, but we do have our opinion panel. And so it's how do we balance news with the opinion, and how do we counteract kind of the forces working against us and saying, well, that's fake news, that's not real, you shouldn't be watching that, or the rise in AI or what's going on social media, and if that's not necessarily, it's kind of proving what's real and putting out a genuine product is getting harder and harder. And so we have to kind of do more work to curate that.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, that's a little scary.
Yeah.
Huh. And how about Brandon, for you, what are some of the trends that are impacting your work that you've noticed?
Well, it's not a great time to be a TV writer or really have any job in Hollywood as far as being employed. I think there was sort of a boom period with streamers where there was suddenly much more content than we had before, and they're hiring a lot of people to help make that. And then they sort of realized we don't really have a great model for this being making money off of this, not losing money. And so I think we're now seeing them sort of counteract that and just not make much less show. Like, I was talking to an executive, and I think it was like a third of what his normal slate would be is what he's doing now. That was a Peacock. Wow. And so there's that going on. And then one thing that's interesting, and I'm like sort of personally currently invested in, is there's an interesting trend towards more independent television that's made in the same way that independent films are. So an independent film, rather than being made with a studio, is you get financing, and then you make it and you try to sell it to a distributor. And that's starting to happen a little bit with television shows, where you're getting the money to produce the show and then like sell it to HBO after, rather than have HBO develop it with you, or to have Netflix buy it after, rather than have them develop it with you. And so I'm trying to do that right now with Marc Duplass's company, and he just had success with it. He has a new show on Netflix called Penelope, and they had that model. And I think it might lead to cool, creative things when shows are being made that way. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's on the one hand, it sounds frightening, but on the other hand, it does create an opening for some of the work that was happening at Binghamton TV, in the cinema department, that can find a place. Was that the model for, what was it, Give Me My Phone Back, or was that?
For that like sketch series I did? Oh yeah, so if you really Google me, you can find a thing that I did called Give Me Back My Phone, when a time in my life where I would have done anything for $100, where it was like a pilot they made for a game show where I had to go around to random people in New York, and the game show was they give me their phone, and then I get to do things on it, like post things on Facebook for them or text people and tell them what I'm doing, and then they see how long they can withstand that. And if they withstand it a certain amount of time, they won money. So you can Google that and find it. I think I was replaced. I think I'm in like one, and then they replaced me with someone else who hosted a short-lived series of it on the internet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So how about you, Mark, for current trends you've noticed and how they're impacting your work?
All I want to do is watch your show now.
Yeah.
It's like the best show I've ever heard.
And they would get $5 for like you calling and telling their mom that they're pregnant.
Yeah, one of them was definitely that. Yep.
That's amazing. If you see that on an episode of the Thundermans, it wasn't me. So the biggest trend that affects the world of kids' television is kids aren't really watching TV anymore. They watch the TikTok and the Instagram, as they say. But it's a problem, because whether you spend $1 million on a TV show or $10 on a YouTube video, it equals the same currency, a kid's time. So kids aren't watching TV like they used to. So that's a problem. I'm just hoping I make it to retirement before the networks figure it out. But apparently they still need to make programming. But the hard part too is like, so the new Thundermans show is going to be on Nickelodeon, which is amazing. I grew up watching Nickelodeon, but my daughter, who's here today, if you ask her friends, they'd be like, we don't have Nickelodeon because we don't have cable. And when will it be on streaming? And I don't have an answer for that because Nickelodeon has like a window where it won't be on streaming for a long time. So that's kind of a weird thing. And then these shows, when I was doing Night Squad, we got like a 1.5 million, and they were like, these ratings are terrible. Then I just did a show called Aaron and Aaron on Nickelodeon, and it got 100,000 viewers. Like, that's where the numbers are at now. So it's really weird. I don't know, like you said, the business model isn't sustainable, and somehow they had a really good thing going with cable, and they figured out how to make cable not work for them. So now that's gonna go away. So I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. Like I said, I hope I'm in Florida with the rest of my Jewish relatives retired, as us Long Island Jews are known to do. But we'll see.
And then, Sarah, what are some trends you've noticed that are impacting your work?
You know, honestly, the same. It's where people are watching our show. You know, we're on at 11:35 on CBS, and I gotta say, I don't know a single one of my friends or anybody my age that stays up and watches our show at 11:35 on CBS. Okay, you're my new best friend. Even my mother will not stay up and watch my show. But everybody's watching it, either clips the next day, or you see a clip on, you know, social media or TikTok or whatever. So it's combating and, again, trying to find people where they are. I know our digital team is doing a lot of work in that regard to, you know, put out the right clips and the right promo stuff to meet these new viewers where they're seeing the content.
Great, thank you. So I'll ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. And if everyone could think about your most memorable experience in show business. And let's start with Sarah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Or we can come back to you. We can do popcorn.
Most memorable in showbiz. I have been lucky enough to go to the Primetime Emmy Awards a few times. Our whole show has gotten to go, so that's always fun. It's kind of like TV prom, you know? Like, you're with all your coworkers, you fly out to LA, you get dressed up, you have a couple parties. It's a really good time. You get to celebrate each other even though we lose every single year, but we still cheer very loudly for ourselves. So that's a really good time. I love that every year.
That's great, thank you. How about you, Emily? What most memorable experience in show business?
I was actually gonna say, not to piggyback off Sarah, I won an Emmy a couple of years ago, but it was like it wasn't a primetime Emmy. It was a local New York Emmy. It wasn't like a. But we, you know, I was working at local news at the time, and the whole newsroom got dressed up, and we went to the Marriott Marquis, and there were lots of bottles of wine on every table, and the ceremony lasted 5.5 hours, and our category was the last one called. So we were all real toasty by the time our category was called, and we like danced on stage and accepted our statue. It was great. But that was fun. And I got to take my mom, so that was a really cool experience, because I've been promising her since I was 3 years old I would take her to the Emmys one day. So.
That's sweet.
But yeah, that was pretty cool.
Wow, thank you. That's super sweet. How about you, Brandon?
When Zach, my writing partner, and I were first starting to write, he wanted to try to get into directing, and so he was like, we should write a short, and I'll direct it, and that'll be how I get into directing. And so we wrote the short film, and he had made a movie a few months prior with Will Ferrell, and he was like, I'm going to send it to Will. We got along pretty well on set. We'll see if he can do it. And he read it, and he said he agreed to do it. And so getting to, like, he came, like, to set to do it, and getting to meet him was very exciting. Like, I was definitely, like, when Will was on SNL, that was, like, my high school, prime watching SNL years. And so he was, like, definitely a comedy hero. And he's also one of those people, like, I always say, like, there's some comedy people, you meet them, and they're not that funny when you meet them in real life, or they're sort of grumpy in real life. And he's as funny in real life as you would want him to be, and seems to be like someone who just enjoys being funny, like he's made a lot of money off of it, but would just make the person in the elevator with him laugh if he was there. So that was very exciting. And that film is called David, if you want to look it up on YouTube. It's a short film called David, directed by Zach Woods.
Okay, great. Well, check that out, David. And then Mark, what was the most memorable experience you've had in show business?
Well, my long storied career in showbiz. No, back when I was a writer's assistant on a very short-lived drama called The Education of Max Bickford, which was a Richard Dreyfuss plays a college professor show. It was actually a really good show. It was him and Marcia Gay Harden, but they had Peter O'Toole as a guest star, which was amazing. So this was the early aughts, and the Segway was just coming out, and the DP on the show, I guess, had invested in the company. So he convinced them to have Segways in the show, and then the bit became that I guess Peter O'Toole was Richard Dreyfuss's mentor as a professor, and he always rode a Segway. So a representative from Segway came to teach me how to ride a Segway so I could teach Peter O'Toole how to ride a Segway. So, cut to me and Peter O'Toole in the parking lot of Silver Cup East in Queens, whipping around the studio, and he loved it. He loved it so much. And then to the point where he's just whizzing around, and an AD's like, "Where's Peter?" And he was like, "Wee!" And I was like, I'm in a surreal world. And if I kill Peter O'Toole, this is on me. But he made it, and it was pretty amazing.
That's pretty great. Great, thank you. So let's open it up to the audience. Are there questions from the audience, or what are the questions from the audience?
Hi, thanks so much for doing this. And you're an amazing host. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Some of my favorite shows have been canceled recently. I was wondering what goes into the process of a show being canceled, and if it's always like the same reasons, if it's just budgeting or if it's other stuff.
Yeah, so I had a show that got canceled not long ago, and it was interesting. So one thing that's interesting about having a show on streaming is they never actually tell you how many people watched it. Like executives that you've had lunch with, that you get along well with, do not tell you that. So they'll say things like, it's performing about as well as our other originals have. And you're like, okay, so that for Peacock, that means bad. Okay. And then the other thing, when for this particular show, he was like, we just spent so much money to get the rights for the NBA. That's where all of our money is. Which was nice to do. He was like very supportive of the show. He's like, I'd love to bring it back, but we can't. But from talking to other people also, it's definitely, usually it's like, the number one thing is how many people were watching it. For streaming, it's really weird because it's partly them trying to figure out to what degree you're driving subscriptions. So for example, if there's a show you want to promote or help, watch it right away, watch all of it because they measure those metrics. If you are going to subscribe to something to watch a particular thing, have that be the first thing you watch when you subscribe, because they track all of that and that's important to them. They're like, oh, they started subscribing because of your show. That's more valuable to us. And then one is how expensive your show is. And so sometimes they can be like, can you do a cheaper version of your show? And sometimes you can't. And then I would say like the third version, this is lower down, but from talking to executives and other people, it's like sometimes how are you to work with? So if you're sort of on the line, if you're like, your show did okay, it's not that expensive, but man, you're a pain in the butt to work with, that might be the reason your show gets canceled.
I can add to that as someone who's had multiple shows canceled. Cancellation comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Like when we did Night Squad on Nickelodeon, now like I said, they were like disappointed at 1.5 million, but they're still doing good, and we had a second season. Then the president of Nickelodeon got fired, and a new president, Brian Robbins, who's now the CEO of Paramount, he took over, and he didn't want any of the old regime shows, so he cleared house. To the point where the actress who was on our show was actually dating his son. And then at dinner said, I didn't know you were on that show, I wouldn't have canceled it. That's a true story. And then another show I worked on, like in the streaming world, though, like you're saying, like I worked on this show, Julie and the Phantoms, and it was like Kenny Ortega directed it, and it was such a good show, like really well done show, but Kenny Ortega has a vision, and it was what they called a tier 3 show, but he went so over budget, it became a tier 1 show. And then it got to the point where they couldn't justify the price tag per episode for the amount of viewers it was getting, even though it did really well and people had a fandom. But for Netflix, it doesn't matter because that's not enough to raise subscriptions. So you really do. The real problem is you have to make a show on budget. You don't want to make a show for under budget because then they assume you can do that. So you always want to be right on the budget. That's the key.
What was that show that Kenny Ortega directed?
Julie and the Phantoms.
Julie and the Phantoms.
So it's a really good show if anybody's
I'll check it out.
watching.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other thoughts on what goes into being canceled or rejected, or even ideas that don't make it that may have in some other form?
That's why I stay out of scripted, because I'm terrified of it.
Yeah, I got nothing either.
Great. How about some other questions from the audience?
All right, I work at Google, and ChatGPT and OpenAI, and our version is Gemini. I'm curious if you guys use it in your industry. It's very big in my industry to use LLMs and various things, ChatGPT to, I don't know, do scripts, right? Do you use it in any way, your emails or in any circumstance? Or if you're worried about it.
We don't. Yeah, no, not on the Late Show, we don't. We do talk about AI and ChatGPT quite a bit. And in the graphics department, we do talk about AI-generated images quite a bit. So the only time we'll ever use something like that is within a story about it. So unless the joke is about ChatGPT or AI-generated images, that's the only time we turn to those tools.
And that's a policy of the show, or?
Yeah, not stated necessarily,
Right.
but especially coming out of the writer's strike recently, there's a lot of very talented people on our show, and there's nothing against AI or ChatGPT, but we like to use the skills and the humans that we have in the building.
Yeah, I think the writer's strike kind of scared everybody into, well, what happens if my job gets replaced by AI? And I think in news, we try, while a lot of AI-generated news information, if you ask for a summary of the news of the day from ChatGPT, it's going to be pretty accurate. But in terms of getting an accurate story out, it's nice to have a human-verified eye on things. Sometimes I wonder if I could program ChatGPT to do my job for me, and I could just go on vacation. But I haven't tried it yet, and I don't plan to. Don't tell my boss that.
Yeah, we didn't use it at all. Occasionally, you might get an email from the publicity department or something that's this feels like it was written by a robot, but I don't know that for sure. Could have been just how they write emails. And then for writing scripts, it's like the fun part is the writing it. That isn't what you would want to have a machine do for you. Of the parts of the job, that's the most fun part. So yeah, we haven't used it.
No, like she would say, the writer's strike scared us. I wouldn't use it anyway, but the one thing I do use it for, which as a showrunner is a lot of times, especially in kids television, because it's weird, we write weird bits and weird things you wouldn't normally see on other shows. It's hard to relate to the department heads, the art department, what you want for that. So I will say the graphic design, using DALL-E and stuff helps us sometimes, because we could be like in Thundermans, we had a bit where they have a mascot competition at the show, and the kid wants a killer whale, and he draws a picture of a killer whale attacking the crowd as the mascot, and then you can put that into the AI generator, and you get the image to show the art department so they can make their own real image. But that's been helpful to relay your idea, because I have no graphic skills at all. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, kind of stole my question, but I'll build off of that. So I work in advertising, and our writers have no issue. They kind of enjoy sometimes being able to use AI to craft things like, say, press releases, because why use a shovel to dig a ditch when you've got an excavator or something like that, and you can spend the time fine-tuning and honing in on the creation of the content that you're creating. But it's advertising, just an ocean of content, whether it's visual or textual. And on the same token, as you alluded to, protecting the labor of those who go into creative writing, or protecting the integrity of the news cycle and the information. So how do you do that long term? Are we still in this phase of fear after the strike, or what's going on with AI in the near future? Is there going to be a movement toward whether it's through talent or writers unions. Like, how do we protect the parts where you want to maintain like artisan craftsmanship with content versus the ocean of content that can be instantly created with AI?
That's the question. I know for one, coming out of the writer's strike, my particular union, I'm in the Writers Guild of America, we renegotiated our contract away from that. So at least for the next year or two, hands off. But it does present an interesting quagmire. I mean, like, can the human brain be that much more developed by AI? Can we, like, what else can we do? So it's interesting to think about. It's scary to think about. But as of right now, and as far as our union contract goes, we're not using it. So.
Yeah, I will say in the graphics department, there are certain AI tools we use. It's not creating an image for you. We're not, plugging it into Midjourney or whatever, typing out and getting a finished photo that we use on TV. We don't do that unless, again, we're talking about AI art. However, within Photoshop, there's now AI tools. Within a lot of the different softwares that our graphics team uses, there are different tools. There's a software that we use called Runway, and that uses AI essentially to help rotoscope. So if you take moving footage and you want to cut somebody out of this moving footage and track them into something else, AI goes a long way to help that be a lot less labor intensive. So we're using tools that take advantage of AI, but then there's still the human component of compositing it into this finished, piece or whatever, adding the different various visual effects that goes on. It just makes that one step a lot faster. And again, when we're turning things around between noon and 3, that helps a lot. So.
On the show I'm working on, the one place I've seen AI really, well, first of all, the machines are going to rise up and take us anyway, so we might as well give in to the AI. But from a VFX standpoint, I don't know, on the animated shows, so we have a lot of special effects on Thundermans, and one thing we have on this new show is the Thundermans have a hologram butler named Thunderford, who is a virtual assistant. But in the discussion with the VFX house, we were like, oh, we'll pay a voice actor to be the voice of this. And they were like, yeah, just get a stand-in to read it, and then we'll take it, put it in the AI, it'll make it an English accent, and we'll animate the face automatically. You don't have to pay anybody. That, to me, we were like, no, that's not okay. You can't do that. So that's scary. And I don't know what's going on. I know the Writers Guild contract on AI pretty well, but I hope in the SAG world that they're on top of that, because that's scary to me.
Yeah, I don't have really an answer. It's scary to me that AI would be used in those roles. And I would also say that, at least in my limited experience, it's not so much about generating like a ton of content. Like, there isn't that much content. It's like trying to make this like very small amount of content you have like as good as you can. So if you're making like a 30-minute episode of TV, it's not that hard. I could write that in a couple hours. But for it to be good, then it takes a lot of people talking as humans to figure that out.
Hi, so I am also a political junkie, but admittedly, I don't get my news from cable. Okay. I get them from like independent news sources on YouTube. And so my question to you is, what do you think of independent news sources, and also how are you guys thinking about attracting younger audiences?
That's a very good question. In terms of younger audiences, we are gearing our content more towards streaming. We're gearing our content more towards social media. MSNBC as a whole has developed a much larger TikTok presence. We have developed a larger Instagram presence. We stream our show on Peacock. We stream an hour of it a day. And that's kind of kept our heads above water for right now. I do think we need to make inroads in attracting younger audiences, because this is the base that needs to, be most educated in what's going on. Obviously, everybody needs to be educated in what's going on, but we need to keep up with the times. I think we're making progress on that every day, but there's always, more to do. As far as independent journalists go and independent news sources, I appreciate them. I think it's important. I do think it's also important to verify what that news is. So, I mean, get your news from as many sources as you possibly can. Watch everything. Watch the under the desk news on TikTok. Watch, this person on YouTube, that person on YouTube. Watch an hour of Fox a day and an hour of MSNBC a day and compare it and do your own research and make your own opinions out of it. And that's, I think, what's important is finding the sources and then verifying your sources. I can tell you until I'm blue in the face that I'm not going to lie to you, but it's your job as a consumer of news to trust what you're getting and formulate your own opinion on it. So.
Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Mr. Reed, 0408, and I remember you in the Pappy Parker Players.
Oh, cool.
So it's great to see you.
Yeah.
Also, BTV alum myself, and so noting just how powerful of a resource BTV was to those of us involved. What do you see is the future of like fungible support from universities, such as obviously Binghamton, in helping students to create and monetize what they create within those spaces, such as BTV? I've seen some models where universities have turned their BTV concept into a YouTube channel, and then there's the fungibility of that. And as far as the arts program as it's developing now, what do you see in terms of how you have local state governments provide things like funding? Do you foresee there being sorts of grants or involvement in helping someone like myself, a show writer and producer of shows, to say film in a place like Binghamton? That's my question.
I guess to speak about the School of the Arts and broader Binghamton University, I know the library has podcast studios set up to make it easier for students to create their own podcast. The Fleischman Center does a lot of professional development, even down to you can get your headshot there now. And School of the Arts, we've been working with them a lot. We put together at least one panel every semester of alum or current professors who come in and talk about the work they're doing, how they transition from Binghamton there, and then meeting with students and helping them bridge there. There's also, we've had generous donors to School of the Arts, so we do have grants for grad students to pay for their projects, not for everyone, people apply to and get. So those are a lot of the ways, in a new visiting artist series at School of the Arts, where we're focusing on making sure when people come in, they're not simply giving their artist talk or presenting their play, but also meeting with the students one-on-one or at least in small groups and helping them through those specifics. So those are some ways that School of the Arts is making sure there's a huge difference. I noticed friends I went to art school with who I felt were a lot more talented than me that had troubles being able to ever actually bring home checks from that. And it came down to just that, learning how to talk about it, learning how to meet people, those bridges, we saw today, one step led to another, and so I want to make sure we help fill that gap. So that's how the school, from my experience so far, is focusing on that, but are there other ways you all feel that the school, that Binghamton, could be helping students bridge? I think that was your question. Yeah, okay, great.
I gotta say, because I'm old, when I was at BTV, we were still making GeoCities web pages, so we didn't have... I never even thought about that. Of course you put the stuff on YouTube. I feel like that's makes perfect sense. You could watch BTV on campus. But why? Why not? If you have a web page, let the world watch it. And I think if you are making videos, as we talked about, that is the future. Attention spans are shrinking, and if you're starting to make that form of learning how to make that content, it not only applies to making shows, it applies to marketing, it applies to news, it applies to everything, advertising. So. I think that's great if that's the way BTV goes. But if it still makes some traditional TV shows, would be good too.
how many students like actually have TVs in their dorms anymore? Because I feel like there probably aren't many. So I mean, in terms of like BTV content in of itself, I think it's important to like get that online, because I don't know how many, if any, are actually watching over the broadcast waves anymore. But yeah, I think
Great.
YouTube is an obvious.
Great. Any other thoughts on that? Are we...
It's a great question. I don't have any good answers
Okay.
for it, but I like the question.
Thanks. Great. So I think we have time for one last question. It looks like we have one person standing, so let's go.
Thank you very much. What is it? My name is Alfredo, like the sauce. Del Castillo. I graduated 2 years ago from 22. I was actually, thank you so much for putting your foot down about that AI stuff, because I'm a voice actor right now. The voice acting the actors had their own strike a while back, and now voice actors are redoing that strike because now we have a whole thing. I have a mentor that's actually a voice actress from here, and another alum, and she's going out. We have classes going through, like, hey, you need to go and read through that contract and make sure they have a clause that is anti-AI and they're not, grabbing your voice, then using it without your permission and then not paying you anything. And so I was actually going to ask, because we were talking about even opportunities in this college, I just want to thank you for that. But more so, I was, the way that you guys talk about it, going step by step, even with the Pappies, I was, I have my own kind of experience with the college of trying to get into things. I have a very nice relationship with the department. But, what the funny thing is about Pappies is I found out about it senior year. And I went to these shows. I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. I missed like the thing by like 1 day. And I want to ask you guys kind of like, I'm feeling this, I kind of went from computer science to theater just because I'm like, oh, I'm not good at this. I need to follow my dream. And it seemed like I dodged a bullet because now people are talking about the computer science field like, oh, it's bad. Now AI is coming, and I'm like, crap. I really screwed myself. I went from the pot into the fire. And I just want to kind of ask you guys, how is it that you guys kind of find these opportunities? Where can I go and kind of like, where do you feel like you can go and get these opportunities? Because even I'm thinking like, oh, one time I did an improv at a convention. I'm like, wow, this is the best thing ever. I need to go do more of this stuff. But I'm realizing now how many opportunities I had in Binghamton, how much stuff like I really had here. And now, despite me being young, I'm like, oh, I guess my life is over. I'm like, everything's for naught. I feel almost like kind of stuck. But I know there's opportunities out there. I'm asking you guys, just from your experience, how does one attain those opportunities or pursue them?
Yeah, so one thing I would say is that they change so fast that sometimes you don't know, and that oftentimes just like hearing about that, it sucks that you found out about Pappies right after, but like that there are those things, but I feel like so many things that I got involved with that became influential were just like I heard someone say something that someone's like roommate does this, and they're like, oh, that's interesting, and if it's interesting to you, even if it doesn't necessarily seem like an immediate practical avenue towards a career, that it's often still really helpful. And so, for example, like my theater major, like I'm not auditioning, for classical theater now, but I do think I learned a lot from taking those classes, and so a lot of times you can apply things in ways you didn't anticipate. So, for example, it's like when I was first starting at UCB, I feel like that was like the beginning of people getting like putting on sketches, like Donald Glover and his like sketch group is like putting on like Derek sketches on YouTube, and for a while it was like everyone wants to do that. That's how you get, and then it moves on from that, and everyone's doing, Abby and Alana are doing Broad City as a web series, and everybody wants to do a web series, but it just keeps changing, and neither of them knew it was going to blow up, sort of when they did it. So sometimes it's like also not being afraid of the new thing, of being like, I heard they're doing hologram comedy shows or whatever the thing is, and being like, that could be the next thing if that seems exciting to you, if that seems like an avenue for your interests, to try it.
The thing I'd add to that is, like I said, like the experimental film department for me wasn't what I wanted to do,
But when I got that job as a night PA, the day PA went to NYU, and we had the same job. So I was like, you know what? I can make my own opportunities. Like, the fact that you discovered you want to do improv your senior, that's enough, right? Now, if you could put yourself, unfortunately, it usually involves moving to a major city that has that scene, but now you know you want to do it. The key, I think, which is just real, is to do it before you have the family and before you have the mortgage, because it's so much harder to do that stuff when you have real responsibilities. So that's the thing, is like, don't wait to do it. You do it, but because at some point you'll be like, I can't afford to do it.
I think as many opportunities as you're gonna get, you're gonna miss 3 times that amount. So don't harp on the things that you've missed. The best, most impactful things I've ever done, I've stumbled into. And I've followed, like they were saying, things that were mentioned to me that I thought, that might be interesting, or things that I was just genuinely passionate about that I didn't think were going to turn into careers, or I didn't know how they were going to shape my career, and I just kind of latched onto it and I did it, and things kind of just ended up working out. I think also networking is important. And people say this, and it's like, well, how much can I just like beg somebody for a job? I don't like go like cold emailing people on LinkedIn, but like meet people and tell people what you want to do and listen to them when they talk and see if they mention an improv class or an improv group or writing lessons or something to that effect that you think, oh, like I'd like to get involved with that. Like tell me more, and they'll keep you in mind when something opens up. So just keep plugging away because it'll happen.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I would say surround yourself with people who, if you want to get into comedy, who find the same things funny as you do, that are in that same world as you are. And if you're around them, just make things, put them on the internet. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about TikTok, YouTube, etc. Is there's so many tools out there for you to make your own content and put it out there and see what that feels like, get the feedback from it, and do it again. And as you surround yourself with people that you enjoy and you enjoy making work with, those are the people that are gonna, help get you into that next role or the next job, and you'll be working with. There's so many people I work with that have worked together for 20 years, So surround yourself with people you like, you enjoy, you have similar tastes in the kind of work you want to do, and just put it out there.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And I mean, used to think networking meant standing around uncomfortably, striking a conversation with bad wine and cheese at some art opening. And what I learned over time, and make sure I talk to students about, is really it's about finding people who love the things you love, sharing that with them, and then it's just natural. Plus, you're doing what you love to do along the process and finding people you truly love along the way. So it's so natural. And of course, that's going to lead you to a place that's right for you, as opposed to this doesn't feel right, but this is what I have to do. And obviously, you're going to end up in the wrong place that way. So that's really great advice. And I'd love to thank all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for coming out to Binghamton and for spending this time with us. Again, it's Marc Dworkin, Emily Gandolfo, Brandon Gardner, and Sara Molinari. Thank you so much for coming. I know Dana's going to talk about what's coming. I want to give one quick plug for the Fall Fest over under a tent at the Event Center. And I can't tell if it's raining. Among many other wonderful things there, students from School of the Arts will be screen printing these two-headed, three-eyed flying pirate bearcats, which is one of our students' kind of strange version. It's our School of the Arts, and you can get B Arts pirate patches, among many other fun things. So come on by.
Cool.
My name, Christopher Robbins. If you want to reach out to me, just think of Winnie the Pooh, Binghamton, you'll find me. My parents did not realize they were doing that. I was like, they were on their honeymoon when they realized I was coming along, and it was a lot of last-minute stuff. Maybe TMI, sorry. Dana.
Wow, thank you so much. A big round of applause for our moderator, Christopher Robbins. And let's hear it for our panel. Excellent, guys. Thank you so much. Shameless plug, it's definitely not raining. It never rains here. But if it was, the Fall Fest is starting right now. It might be outside, but tents are available. A lot of stuff going on, so head your way down to the Event Center area. Following that, at 6:07 p.m. is the soccer game. And then fireworks tonight at 9. So still plenty more going on. Don't go anywhere. Look forward to seeing everybody around town here. But that's it. That's our show. So thank you for everybody joining us on our Tier Talks 2024. I look forward to seeing everybody at Homecoming 2025. These get faster and faster as they start showing up every single year. So thanks again for joining us. We'll see you around and see you next time. Thanks.